It's all alchemy, it's all power. And what you're taking different contents and you're making form out of it. You must control the market value of what the thing
People
is that
deserve
you
to
sell.
have love, and people deserve to
There's
have
14
freedom.
people want that same slice of pie. How do you get the slice of pie?
So let's say I'm an ordinary person. How will I become successful with limited resources?
A lot of people will say it takes money to make money, or that a person has to be economically independent to become more economically independent, or the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. People always say this kind of stuff. The truth is that each one of us has enormous numbers of resources available to us that are not connected to cash. I actually work with a list I made up. I call them the 17 wealth and freedom resources. They're part of the written body of work that I've created. And they include things like time and space and information and influence, psychological clarity, emotional balance, sweat equity, the ability to use your labors in exchange for things that you need. We can barter all of these things. You can trade what you have for what you need. It goes on and on and on. So if a person really sat down and they looked at how much time they have, or the kind of friends they have, influence they have, connections to people that they may have. Maybe they have a basement or an attic in their house where people can store things. People actually rent storage space. They go out and they pay money to store stuff. You would be amazed at the amount of success that you can have. Very often what we do is we barter. We barter things that we have, and then for other things that people have, we sell them on eBay for cash. And then that cash can be invested in something, and then use the profit made from that investment to buy something else that we can barter with, that we can trade to sell something on eBay. So the idea is you have to be systematic in sitting down and looking, what do you have? Maybe it's good looks. Maybe you're an athletic, attractive person. Maybe you are a very articulate person. Maybe you're somebody who can be trusted. I know people make a living doing nothing but getting on planes and taking papers or money to people in third world countries or other places because they need something that can be trusted, and they can't send it by FedEx overnight. That's how they make their living, just being trustworthy, or dependable. So we all have resources in our lives that we really don't think about and don't look at. And if we took the time to look at these qualities, these resources, we would be able to leverage them against other resources that we have to create success. And this can be done by anybody. In fact, a person that doesn't have a job, who's an honest person, has sweat equity. They have plenty of time on their hands, and they have sweat equity. It's 2 of the 17 resources right there. And there are people who need people that have time. There are people that don't have time. It's the one thing they don't have. And they need someone else that has time. And so that is the key for someone who is not already wealthy, who may not know a lot of wealthy people. This is the process of how they can maximize their potential.
You mentioned the concept of conservation and balance. Talk more about that, please.
When you look at modern society, I'm not talking about America in particular, this is America, India, it doesn't really matter where you are. There's almost this addiction to short-term gratification. They talk about people have less savings than they ever had before. People spend money that they don't have. They build enormous amounts of credit. The divorce rate is incredibly high. People seem not to be able to sustain long-term relationships. All of this comes out of, I don't want to say a lack of maturity. There's a lack of distinction in people's minds between short-term gratification and long-term benefits. There was a time where people would not act on certain things or withhold themselves from certain things because they knew the cost might be too high, even though the short-term pleasure was great, the cost would be too high long-term. So people seem to have lost that distinction. And so people act impulsively, they make decisions impulsively, and in the end, it's a tremendous cost to them and to society as a whole. So the concept of conservation and balance says that if you go back to the previous question that you asked me about an ordinary person becoming successful, if you look at those resources of time and space and information and influence, and you see that you're great with time, or you're great with relationships, or you're a loving person, or you're a people person, whatever the skills you have, if you take those skills and you maximize them for the greatest return on investment, I'm looking at it almost as a business model, that you have this resource, psychological clarity, emotional balance under pressure, and you take these and you utilize them and you conserve them. You save them and you use them when they get the greatest benefit for you, when they produce the most for you. What you have is a conservation of energy, a balanced life with tremendous love, freedom, and economic independence, which is going back to the very first question of how do you define success? If you have a lot of love in your life, and people you can express love to, and you have freedom, and you have economic independence in emotional ways and in physical ways and spiritual ways, you're a successful person. It is virtually impossible to have that kind of success without an understanding of the idea of conservation and balance. Conserving your resources and using them in balanced ways so that they can serve both your greatest good and the good of others. And by the way, I'm not being fluffy here. We're talking about freedom, love, and wealth. We're saying you're going to have the kind of life that most people dream of having, materially. That you're going to really be able to take this to a whole other level. It's a transformational process. And each of these pieces I've given you, through your questions is the groundwork for someone having the kind of life that they really want to have, that most of us want to have.
To what extent would you say success is a state of mind versus the actions that you need to take to change your life?
Well, a person could think you're successful and be delusional, of course. So the fact that someone thinks they're successful doesn't really make them successful. There are some people who really are mentally unstable and think they're successful. I'm sure that in the mental hospital somewhere there's someone who thinks they're John Paul Getty. Just no one else thinks that they are. Clearly, attitude has a lot to do with becoming successful. So again, I'm not using the term success as a general term. It's very specific, and that is, and I want to emphasize that again, that success is having love, economic independence, and freedom, both spiritually, emotionally, and physically. So it's a very specific template. It's not just some new agey sort of fluffy kind of idea. I'm not quite sure how a person could have that definition of success and have a negative attitude about life or a negative attitude about people, or a mental state, a state of mind where they're constantly worrying. I don't see it. We just saw a movie, there's a movie, The Aviator, great film that was made about Howard Hughes. He was the wealthiest man in the world, and clearly a tortured soul. And he was loved. He was loved by some of the most beautiful women in the world. He had incredible wealth. He had people incredibly loyal to him. But his psychological state his state of mind, the psychology of how his mind worked, was distorted. They know now that he had obsessive compulsive disorder, which of course they didn't know at that time. So clearly, having clarity of mind and emotional balance is a key element to having the kind of success that we're talking about. And if a person doesn't have that, they need to get mentored or coached or go into therapy or do some kind of process so they can get to that state of emotional balance and attitudinal clarity.
How important are things like Facebook, blogs, and other social networking tools to success?
It's interesting you asked that, because one of those 17 wealth and freedom resources I talked about is called tools. And a tool on a basic level can just be a hammer knocking a nail into a piece of wood. But technology is very, very important. And the ability to use technology to create effective relationships is very valuable. Obviously, we're using technology right here. This is a tool, and it's actually, you could say it's a social networking tool for those who are going to connect up to this. Obviously, I'm not physically in your living room, but I'm on your DVD, you're watching this on YouTube. The truth that you ignore will come back to bite you on the butt. That's a saying that I have. And if a person is looking to maximize their potential and have freedom in their lives, it is essential that they master or have someone who has mastered the use of social networking technology. So the application of that has to be very skilled. And we talked about skill being one of the 4 reasons why people have problems, lack of skill. So there are people who Twitter, or they go on Facebook or LinkedIn or other social networking sites, and they just waste their time. They spend all their time reading whether someone's having lunch or sitting on a beach somewhere. So just social networking for the sake of social networking is not an effective tool, but the ability to use these tools to fill the needs of other people. Remember, people have needs that need to be met. And if you can meet someone else's needs through social networking and create value for them, what will happen is that will come back to you tenfold. So I would say social networking is essential, and it's something that can be done very, very poorly. And it's a learning process like anything else. So once a person is committed to maximizing their potential, if you're looking to maximize your potential, then the use of technology as a way of creating greater love, greater wealth, and greater freedom in your life is core. And certainly blogging and websites and all of that, being part of networks, is incredibly, incredibly invaluable. Now, how do you do that effectively? You either learn it yourself, or you find somebody who does know that, and you hire them. And if you don't have the money to hire them, then you barter with them by leveraging those 17 wealth and freedom resources that we discussed earlier.